And as we have with the other witnesses, I'll ask you to state your name and then spell it for the court reporter, please.
Rhonda Jewell, RHONDA JEWELL.
Thank you, Ms. Jewell. And obviously, you've just introduced yourself to the jury. Ms. Jewell, how old are you?
I am currently 46.
And are you married?
Yes, ma'am.
And who is your husband?
Robert Jewell.
How long have you been married?
December will be 27 years.
And do you have any children?
Yes, ma'am.
How many children do you have?
3.
How old are your children currently?
The oldest is 25. The second is 22. And the last one is 19.
And you have 2 boys and a girl, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How old is your daughter?
19.
Back in May of 2023, last year, how old would your daughter have been?
18.
And had she just graduated from college high school around that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Obviously, you have raised your 3 children. Have you ever acted as a nanny to other people's children?
Yes, ma'am.
And about how many children, if you know, have you nannied?
I started nannying at the age of 17, until I had my own children. So then I took care of my own children, and as they got older, I kept nieces and nephews, and then full-time, nannying for people that needed me.
Okay. Do you know about when you started babysitting or nannying again?
I was 17 years old.
I'm sorry, after you took the break with your own kids, when did you start again?
About 2017.
And can you name some of the people whose children you've babysat?
I kept Mike and Kaylee Rogers, 2 kids. Ashley Altman's 1 child. Mallory Burnson Rosenpile, her 1 child. Emily Tedesco, 1 child. Angela Connor, 2 children.
Is it fair to say that you have consistently nannied at least several days a week for the large majority of time since 2016, 2017?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. As you're taking care of these children, do you treat the children as you would treat your own children?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
And how do you feel about these kids?
Like they're my own.
Do you know Brooke Page?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know Brooke?
She's a family friend. I've known her since she was in high school. She went to school with my nephew, graduated with my nephew. We went on vacations together. We went to dinners together 2-3 times a week. We done family functions together, each other's house, with their family as well.
Did you consider Brooke's mother, Monique Carter, to be your best friend?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
With regard to your relationship to Monique, were you also close to her daughters, Brooke and Nevaeh?
Yes, ma'am.
Was it uncommon for you to talk to them, Brooke and Nevaeh, even when Monique wasn't around?
Yes, ma'am.
You would talk to them?
Mm-hmm.
And how did you communicate with them?
Text, Snapchat, Instagram.
And what sort of things would you guys talk or text about?
Do you want to go eat dinner? You want to come over tonight? Just, you want to go to the, we went camping together a lot, so we would communicate about just family functions together.
Did you feel involved or engaged in their lives and what was going on in them as well?
Yes,
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Overruled.
You said that you knew Brooke Page when she was in high school. Was that around the time that your family and Brooke's family reconnected?
I think she graduated after, no, she graduated before. My son graduated in 2017. So from 2017, her brother and my son graduated together. They played football, baseball together as children.
So since that time frame is when the 2 families came together and you had this close relationship that you described?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you know Ariya Page?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you know Ariya?
Ariya was Brooke and Justice's daughter.
Can you describe for the jury what kind of relationship you had with Ariya, Rhonda?
I loved her like she was my own. I was there for baby showers, weddings, of Brooke and Justice. I gravitated to her just like I would any baby.
And during the course of the dinners and vacations and things that you've described that you did with this family, would you spend time with Ariya during those events as well?
Absolutely.
Let's move forward to Miss Stacy Paschal. How do you know Stacy Paschal?
I nannied for her 3 children.
How did that come to be that you became her nanny?
She heard her nanny up and quit working for her without a notice. And I had several people call me and ask me if I would consider nannying for her. Just in one day, 2 or 3 people called me. And I told her that I would have to think about it and that I would call her within a few days.
At that time, had you been on a little bit of a hiatus from nannying, meaning had you stopped doing that for a little while?
Yes.
Okay. So it sounds as though Ms. Paschal reached out to you to do those services for her. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you actually eventually start watching her children?
Yes, ma'am.
How did that come about? Did Stacy, let me back up, did Stacy vet you in any fashion to make sure you would be okay and a good fit with her kids?
She called me and asked me. We talked about, the days, how long of days, and then just talked over the phone. And then I eventually went to her house and talked with her and her husband, sit down with her and her husband and her children, and I got to know them on a personal, on a level that a nanny would know them, and gravitated to them. They liked me, and that was.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's what I loved about them, because they gravitated to me. They didn't know me. They were older. So,
Did that visit with them lead to you serving as their nanny?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember when you started watching Stacy Paschal's children?
Late February, maybe early March.
And would that have been of last year, 2023?
Yes, ma'am.
When you first started watching them, what days were you keeping them?
Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
And where would you keep those children?
I would drive to her house from my house.
Sometimes when you arrived, were the children awake?
Not always.
And so sometimes they were sleeping and sometimes they were awake?
Yes, ma'am.
After you began keeping Stacy's children, did Brooke contact you about keeping Ariya for her?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall when that was?
Late May, early June, somewhere in there.
Of last year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so 2023?
Yes, ma'am.
When Brooke reached out to you about keeping Ariya, did you immediately say yes, or did you have to check on that?
No, I was working for Stacy, and I said I would have to talk to Stacy because I kept, them at her house. So I would have to, confer with her to see if it was okay. And so, but I would get back with her.
And I assume that Stacy said it was okay for you to keep Ariya at her house?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall whenever you started keeping Ariya, what days of the week you kept her initially?
Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
And at that time, did those days line up generally with the days that you were keeping Stacy's children?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there ever schedule changes where you would sometimes have Ariya and not have Stacy's children?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there ever schedule changes where sometimes you would have Stacy's children and not Ariya?
Yes, ma'am.
So initially back in, I think you said late May, early June, you're keeping Stacy's twins, sometimes her daughter, and then you would have Ariya as well.
Yes, ma'am.
And so generally at that time, you're having the twins and Ariya those 3 days a week that you told us, correct?
Yes, ma'am.